The laughter hit Clara Belle Mercer before she even reached the door. She stopped with one hand on the wooden frame, her fingers tightening around the little parcel of sewing thread she carried against her chest. Behind her, Silas Rourke laughed loudest. "Careful, Clara," he called. "That dress looks like it already buried someone." A few men at the counter snickered. Clara lowered her eyes. The blue dress was old. There was no denying it. The hem had been repaired twice. One sleeve carried a row of nearly invisible stitches, and along the collar the fabric had faded from years of washing. But every stitch had been put there by her mother. Martha Mercer had sewn that dress the winter after Clara's father died. Clara had never been ashamed of it until that moment. She began to step outside. Silas wasn't finished. "Maybe your mother ought to sell that thing to the ragman," he said. "Might finally earn the family a proper meal." The laughter grew. Clara's face burned. She could have answered him. She could have told him that his father owned half the stores in town because people were afraid to owe him money. She could have reminded everyone that Silas had never worked a full day in his life. But Clara had learned something from her mother. When cruel people wanted a reaction, giving them silence was sometimes the only victory left, so she said nothing. Then a coffee cup touched the wooden counter, not loudly, just once. The room gradually went still. At the back of the mercantile sat a man nobody had noticed paying attention, Elias Creed. He wore a weathered black coat, plain boots, and a silver watch chain disappearing beneath his vest. His clothes were good but not flashy. His hat rested beside an untouched cup of coffee. Most people in town knew the name. Fewer knew the man. Elias owned Creed Ranch, thousands of acres stretching beyond the eastern hills. He owned cattle, freight wagons, and several profitable contracts with distant towns. Some said he was the richest cowboy in the territory. But Elias never dressed like it. He looked at Clara, then at Silas, then back at Clara's dress. He noticed the stitching, not the worn fabric, the stitching. He stood. The chair legs scraped softly across the floor. Silas grinned. "What is it, Creed?" Elias didn't answer. He walked to the counter, reached into his coat, and placed a silver coin beside the shopkeeper's ledger. The shopkeeper stared at it. "What's that for?" "Thread," Elias said. Silas laughed. "Thread?" Elias nodded toward Clara. "For every color she needs." The laughter disappeared. Clara looked at him, confused. Elias didn't look at Silas. He looked at the shopkeeper. "Put it on her mother's account." Martha Mercer had no account here. Everyone knew that. The shopkeeper understood what Elias was doing. He was giving Martha work without making it look like charity. Clara's fingers loosened around her parcel. "Mr. Creed," finally looked at her. "You don't owe me thanks." His voice was quiet enough that everyone had to listen. Clara swallowed. Silas stepped forward. "You buying her thread because you think that makes you some kind of hero?" Elias turned. For the first time he looked directly at him. "No," one word, nothing more. Silas waited. Elias reached for his coffee. Then he said, "I'm buying thread because a working woman shouldn't have to choose between pride and supper." Someone near the window shifted uncomfortably. Silas's smile disappeared. "You think money makes you better than me?" Elias shook his head. "No." He glanced around the room. Then his eyes settled on Clara. "A man's worth isn't measured by what he can afford. It is measured by what he does when nobody can make him do right." No one laughed. Clara looked down at her dress again. The same blue cloth that had felt like a weight against her skin now seemed strangely different, not prettier, not newer, just hers. Silas tapped his boot against the floor, once, twice. He had a habit of doing that whenever things stopped going his way. Elias noticed. He noticed everything. Silas stepped closer. "You'll regret embarrassing me in front of these people." Took one slow sip of coffee. "I didn't embarrass you." Set the cup down. "You did that yourself." A murmur passed through the room. Clara almost smiled, almost. She stepped toward the door. This time nobody laughed. Outside, the afternoon wind carried dust along the street. Clara walked home with her parcel held tightly against her chest. Behind her, the mercantile door closed. Elias remained inside. Silas remained too. Neither man spoke for several seconds. Then Silas leaned toward him. "You don't know who you're dealing with." Looked toward the window. Across the street, Clara disappeared around the corner. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with." Silas frowned. Elias reached beneath his vest and touched the edge of his old silver pocket watch, a habit he had carried for 20 years. "When a man laughs at a poor girl's dress," he said quietly, "you learn more about the man laughing than you ever learn about the girl." Silas scoffed. You threatening me? Elias shook his head. No, he stood and put on his hat, remembering your name. Then he walked out into the dust. Silas watched him go. He still didn't understand, not yet. But by winter, everyone in that town would understand why Elias Creed had remembered it. By sunrise, Silas Rourke had told the story 3 different ways. In the first version, Elias Creed had threatened him. In the second, Elias had humiliated him deliberately. By breakfast, Silas was telling anyone who would listen that the millionaire rancher had decided he owned the town. None of the stories were true, but truth had never traveled as quickly as gossip. By 9 o'clock, men outside the blacksmith's shop were arguing about it. By 10, 2 merchants had already chosen sides. And by 11, Martha Mercer discovered that the town's memory had become more expensive than she could afford. She stood behind the counter of her little sewing shop, holding a folded invoice in one hand. The paper trembled. "Sorry, Mrs. Mercer," the shopkeeper across from her said. "New policy." Martha looked at him. New policy. He wouldn't meet her eyes. More credit. "I've paid every account." "I know." "Then what changed?" The man sighed. "Nothing you did." That answer told Martha everything. Someone had changed it for him. She folded the invoice carefully. "Who?" The shopkeeper remained silent. Martha nodded. She didn't need the name. Everyone knew Silas Rourke's father had influence over nearly every merchant within 50 miles. She walked back to her shop through a town that suddenly seemed to have fewer windows. People looked away when she passed. Some whispered. Clara noticed it immediately. She was standing behind the sewing table, arranging spools of thread. "What happened?" "Nothing," Martha said. Clara knew her mother too well. That means something happened. Martha placed the invoice on the table. Clara read it. Her expression changed. "They can't do this." "They can." "Why?" Martha looked toward the window. "Because your dress became somebody else's business." Lowered her eyes. The words hurt more than she expected. "I wish I'd never worn it." Martha immediately reached across the table. Looked up. "Don't you ever say that." Martha touched the repaired sleeve. "Your father bought this cloth when you were little. I made this dress because we didn't have money for another. Every stitch kept you warm." Her voice softened. "There is nothing shameful about that." Nodded, but her eyes remained troubled. Across town, Elias Creed was doing something nobody expected. He was spending money, a great deal of it, but not on himself. He walked into Martha Mercer's shop shortly after noon. Clara looked up from her sewing. Martha stiffened. Mr. Creed removed his hat. "Mrs. Mercer." Clara watched him carefully. He placed a leather folder on the counter. Martha didn't touch it. "What is that?" "An order." "For what?" "Shirts, work trousers, winter coats, gloves." Martha opened the folder. Her eyes widened. There were pages of measurements, dozens of them. "Many men do you employ?" "Enough." "This is too much work for my shop." Nodded. "Then hire another seamstress." Martha stared at him. "With what money?" "Mine." She closed the folder. "I don't accept charity. I didn't offer any." Elias pointed to the order. "I need clothing." Pointed toward the sewing machines. "You need work." Then he stepped back. "That makes it business." Martha studied him. "You planned this?" "Yes." "Because of Clara." Elias looked toward the girl. Clara was threading a needle. Martha raised an eyebrow. Elias continued. "Because your work is good." Looked up. It was the first compliment anyone had given her mother that week without attaching pity to it. Martha slowly reopened the folder. "How soon do you need the first shipment?" 2 weeks. She calculated silently. "That means I need another pair of hands." "Then hire one." "You make everything sound simple." Elias almost smiled. "Hard work isn't simple." Placed a payment advance on the counter. Martha pushed it back. "I'll take payment when the work is delivered." Looked at the money, then at her. He nodded. "Right." Picked up his hat. Clara watched him approach the door. "Mr. Creed." He stopped. She hesitated. "Why did you really help us?" Elias didn't turn immediately. When he finally did, his expression was calm. "Because your mother shouldn't have to prove she deserves to work." Then he left. Clara watched him disappear through the doorway. Martha looked down at the order. For the first time in days, there was hope sitting on her counter. But hope had a price in Rourke country. That evening, Silas learned exactly how much money Elias Creed controlled. His father was standing behind the desk in the Rourke mercantile office when Silas entered. "Father." His father didn't look up. "What did you do?" Silas stopped. "What do you mean?" Creed placed an order with the Mercers. "So?" His father finally raised his eyes. "You understand who Elias Creed is?" Silas shrugged. "A rancher." His father laughed once. "No." Leaned back. "He owns the ranch." Said nothing. "He owns the cattle." Still nothing. He owns the freight contract that brings half the goods into this territory. Silas's face tightened. And he has enough money to survive anything you can do to him. Stared at his father. You're afraid of him. No, his father closed the ledger. I'm warning you. Warnings were not what Silas heard. He heard an insult. He had spent his whole life believing money made him untouchable. Now there was a man in town with more of it who didn't seem interested in proving anything. That made Silas furious. Later that night, he found Elias outside the livery stable. You think you're better than everyone here. Continued checking his horse's reins. No. You think you can buy people's loyalty. Looked at him. Then what are you doing? Elias tightened the saddle strap. Working. Silas laughed bitterly. You're making me look foolish, mounted his horse. I haven't done anything to you. Silas stepped closer. You're going to regret this. Looked down from the saddle. The town was quiet. A lantern burned above the stable door. You keep saying that. Silas's jaw tightened. Elias turned his horse toward the road. But you never say what you think I'm supposed to regret. Then he rode into the darkness. Silas stood alone beneath the lantern. For the first time in his life, he had discovered something money couldn't fix. Someone who wasn't impressed by it. And that was the beginning of the real trouble. The first account was closed before Martha had finished breakfast. The second came before noon. By sunset, the third merchant had refused her order for winter cloth. Martha stood behind her counter with 3 notices spread before her, each one carrying the same polite words and the same unmistakable message. No more credit. No more favors. No more room. Outside, the town moved as it always had, wagons rattling over the road, horses stamping near the hitching rails, men calling across the street. But something had changed. People who had once greeted Martha now found reasons to look elsewhere. Clara noticed every one of them. She also noticed the whispers. Creed's keeping them. Own that shop before winter. Why else would a man like him spend that much money? The rumors grew with every retelling. By afternoon, someone had added another lie. They said Elias Creed intended to buy the Mercer property and force Martha to work for him. Clara heard it outside the general store. She stopped. 2 women nearby fell silent. One looked embarrassed. The other simply turned away. Clara carried her parcel home without speaking. When she entered the shop, Martha was balancing the accounts. Mother, Martha looked up. What? People think Mr. Creed is buying our shop. Martha's expression hardened. He isn't. I know. Do you? Clara hesitated. Martha closed the ledger. I've lived long enough to know that accepting help and surrendering your life are 2 different things. She looked toward the window. And I won't surrender ours. That evening, Sheriff Amos Pike found Elias at the edge of town. The sheriff dismounted slowly. Walk with me. Nodded. They followed the dusty road toward the courthouse. You've got trouble, Amos said. I've heard. Rourke's been talking. He usually is. The sheriff stopped. This isn't funny. Turned. Amos lowered his voice. He's telling people you're trying to buy influence through the Mercers. Glanced toward the courthouse. Can he prove it? No. Then let him talk. Amos stared at him. You could shut him down in an afternoon. With money, with influence. Shook his head. Then I'd be doing exactly what he's doing. The sheriff frowned. You're a wealthy man, Creed. I know. You could make life very difficult for the Rourkes. Looked toward the distant hills. I could. Then why don't you? Elias rubbed the edge of his silver pocket watch. Because I don't want to become the answer to my own complaint. Amos studied him. You really believe patience will fix this? No. Looked back at town. People will. That night Martha considered leaving. She sat at the kitchen table while Clara folded fabric beside her. We could go north, Martha said. Clara stopped. Where? Anywhere. You hate traveling. I hate being watched more. Looked at her mother. Would we be running? Martha didn't answer. A knock came at the door. Both women froze. Clara opened it. Elias stood outside. He removed his hat. May I come in? Martha nodded reluctantly. He stepped inside but remained near the door. I heard you're thinking of leaving. Martha's eyes narrowed. News travels quickly. Too quickly. She folded her arms. Did you come to stop me? No, that answer surprised her. Elias continued. If leaving is what keeps your family safe, I'll help you leave. Looked at him. Martha studied his face. And if we stay, I'll help you stay. You'll decide. No, Elias's answer came immediately. You decide. Settled over the room, Martha's expression softened. You're different from what people say. Gave a faint smile. People usually are. Almost laughed. It was the first light moment in days. Then something struck the front window. Everyone turned. A small stone lay on the floor. Attached to it was a folded piece of paper. Clara picked it up. Martha reached for her wrist. "Don't." Clara unfolded it. 4 words were written across the page. "Next time, no audience." The room went silent. Elias held out his hand. Clara gave him the note. He read it once, then again. His face did not change, but his fingers tightened around the paper. Martha saw it. "Mr. Creed." Elias folded the note carefully. "Lock the doors tonight." "Who wrote it?" "I don't know." "You do?" He looked at Clara, then at Martha. "I know who wants you to think he wrote it." Martha's voice dropped. "Silas." Elias didn't answer. He walked to the window and looked into the dark street. Nothing moved, no footsteps, no wagon, no figure beneath the lamps, only dust drifting across the road. Elias opened the door. Martha stood. "Where are you going?" "To speak with someone." "Silas." "No." Put on his hat. The sheriff followed him to the porch. "Mr. Creed." He stopped. She wanted to ask whether she was afraid. Instead, she asked something else. "Are you afraid?" Elias looked toward the dark horizon. Hadn't expected that answer of him. Elias shook his head. "Of what happens when people mistake patience for weakness." Walked away beneath the moonlight. Clara watched until the darkness swallowed him. Inside the house, Martha quietly locked the door. Across town, Silas Rourke stood at his bedroom window, staring toward the Mercer home. He smiled. He had wanted Elias angry. He had wanted him loud. He had wanted the millionaire cowboy to prove that all his talk about dignity was nothing more than pride wearing a clean coat. Instead, Elias had gone to the sheriff. That irritated Silas more than any threat could have. He turned from the window. "Fine," he whispered. "If you won't fight me." His smile disappeared. "I'll give you something worth fighting for." Somewhere beyond the town limits, the wind began pushing dust across the empty road. The trouble was no longer about a dress. It had found a target. The horse came back without Clara. Martha knew something was wrong before she saw the empty saddle. She had been standing behind the sewing table, listening for the familiar rhythm of Clara's footsteps outside. Instead, she heard hooves, one horse, running hard. Then the front door opened and Sheriff Amos Pike stepped inside. Behind him stood Elias Creed. Neither man spoke. Martha's eyes went to the horse through the window. "Where is my daughter?" Amos removed his hat. "Going to find her." Martha gripped the edge of the table. "Where is she?" "We don't know yet." The room seemed to shrink. Clara had left before sunset to deliver finished clothing to the boarding house on the South Road. The trip should have taken 20 minutes. An hour had passed, then 2, and now her horse had returned alone. Martha turned toward Elias. "You said you'd help us." "I will." Voice was quiet. No promises, no speeches, just certainty. He stepped outside. Amos followed. At the horse's side, Elias examined the saddle. The reins were loose. One stirrup carried a small tear in its leather strap. He crouched near the ground. There. A broken button lay in the dirt. Amos picked it up. "From her coat?" Elias nodded. Then he looked toward the southern road. Someone stopped her. "How do you know?" The horse didn't run home frightened. Stood. It was turned loose. Amos's expression hardened. They mounted immediately. Martha watched from the doorway. Before Elias rode away, he looked back. "Keep the lamp burning." Martha nodded. Then the 2 men disappeared into the dark. The road south was nearly empty. Moonlight silvered the grass. Elias rode ahead, studying the ground. Amos followed. After half a mile, Elias raised his hand. Both horses stopped. "There are tracks." Amos dismounted. 3 horses had passed through the soft earth. One belonged to Clara. The other 2 were unfamiliar. They followed the trail beyond the main road toward an abandoned freight station where old wagons were sometimes left during winter. The wind grew colder. Elias slowed his horse. Amos whispered, "You think she's there?" "I think someone wants us to think she is." The sheriff looked at him. "You're expecting an ambush." "I've learned not to assume anything." They left the horses behind the ridge and continued on foot. A lantern glowed inside the abandoned station. Then they heard a voice, Silas Rourke. "You didn't have to make this difficult." Elias stopped. Through a gap in the boards, they could see Clara sitting on an old wooden crate. She was frightened but unharmed. Silas stood several feet away. One of his friends leaned against the wall. Amos whispered, "Stay here," shook his head. "She's heard enough whispers." Stepped through the doorway. Silas turned. His smile vanished. "You," looked at Clara first. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "Can you walk?" "Yes." "Then come here." Stepped between them. "You don't give orders here." Elias's eyes moved to him. "No." He glanced at Clara. "She does." Clara stood. Silas reached for her arm. Elias moved. There was no dramatic charge, no shouted threat. One moment Silas's hand was reaching forward, the next, Elias had redirected his wrist and stepped between him and Clara. Silas stumbled backward. His friend reached inside his coat. Amos drew his revolver. "Don't." Man froze. The sheriff's voice was steady. "Everybody walks out of here breathing easy." Elias kept his eyes on Silas. "This ends now." Silas laughed nervously. "You think you can scare me?" "No." Elias released his wrist. "I think you're already scared." Silas's face tightened. "You've been humiliating me since you arrived. I never said your name. You knew what you were doing." Nodded toward Clara. "You brought her here." Looked away. "I wanted to teach you a lesson." "You frightened a girl to punish a man." Said nothing. Elias' voice remained calm. "That isn't strength." Silas suddenly stepped forward. Elias didn't move. "Ahead," Elias said. Silas stopped. "You want me to hit you?" "No." "Then why aren't you?" "You're hopping." "I will." Stared at him. Elias continued. "If I strike you, you'll spend the rest of your life telling people I was the villain." He stepped aside. "But if I don't," looked toward Sheriff Pike, "they'll have to listen to what you actually did." Amos stepped forward. "Silas Rourke, you're coming with me." Silas's friend protested. "For what?" "Harassment, coercion, and whatever else the evidence supports." Silas looked toward Elias. "You'll regret this." Shook his head. "No." Then he looked at Clara. "Let's go home." Ride back was quiet. Clara rode beside Elias for several miles. Neither spoke. Finally she said, "I thought you were going to hurt him." Looked toward the road. "Did he?" "Didn't you?" "Because he wanted me angry." Looked at him. "And you weren't?" Elias took a breath. "I was." That honesty surprised her. Being angry doesn't mean you have to obey your anger. The words stayed with her. When they reached the Mercer home, Martha ran outside. Clara dismounted. Her mother pulled her into an embrace. For several moments nobody spoke. Then Martha looked at Elias. "Thank you." Shook his head. "She came home because she was brave." Looked at him. "Because you came." Said nothing. Martha noticed the silence between them. Not romantic, not dramatic, something quieter. Trust. Clara looked down at her blue dress. A small tear had appeared near the hem during the ride. She touched it. "I can fix it." Nodded. "I know." Mounted his horse. Clara watched him. "Mr. Creed." He stopped. She hesitated. "You really aren't afraid of Silas?" Elias looked back at her. "I am afraid of something." "What?" He looked toward the dark road. "That one day people will confuse kindness with weakness." Then he rode away. Clara stood beside her mother beneath the porch lamp. Neither woman knew it yet. But the night had changed everything. Silas had crossed the line. And Elias Creed had finally found something he could no longer pretend was merely someone else's trouble. It was personal now.